Hello, welcome to my channel, Another Bibliophile Reads. My name is Greg, and I am here to do the reveal of my Would You Read It challenge. This is a challenge originally posted by Steve Donahue, where he read passages from books and asked people to think, would they read that passage? Now, I did the same thing, but when I read a passage, I did not reveal the title or the author of the book. And after 2 weeks, I would reveal the titles and then read the book that got the most amount of votes. So here we are with my books that I read. The first one that I read was Georges Perec's A Void. This is a book that I thought would get a little more attention, but didn't. Some people mentioned that this had a very unusual style, and they are correct. This novel is written as a lipogram, and a lipogram is a writing constraint where the author chooses not to use a certain letter of the alphabet. Now, this book was originally written in French, and the letter the author chose not to use was the letter E. And E is the most common letter in the French language. When this book was translated, it was translated again and again. E is the most common letter in English. The author did not use any words with the letter E. So when you read the first sentence, none of these words have the letter E. Today, by radio and also on giant hoardings, a rabbi, an admiral, notorious for his links to masonry, a trio of cardinals, a trio, too, of insignificant politicians, bought and paid for by a rich and corrupt Anglo-Canadian banking corporation, inform us all how our country now risks dying of starvation. So I thought this was a fabulous experiment of a book. I remember watching Mark Nash on his channel bashing this book a little. He thought it was just a silly little game that an author played. It did get very well reviewed by Walter Abash, who is another experimental novelist who wrote a book called Alphabetical Africa, where in the first chapter of that book, he only uses words that begin with the letter A. In the second chapter of that book, he can use letter words with A or B, and the third A, B, or C, and so forth until he gets to the 26th chapter. After the 26th chapter, he starts counting back the letters until it ends with only A again. I highly recommend this book for anyone who likes experiments with language. That got 2 votes. The second book was Peter Doyle by John Vernon. This is an historical novel, and it's about Napoleon Bonaparte. If you remember the reading, there was a dead man, and he's being examined by doctors, and they're taking body parts away and putting them in jars. Now, the author of this book described a rumor that he heard that may or may not be true of a scavenger who stole Napoleon's penis and then tried to sell it to a collector. So the main character of this book has Napoleon's severed penis in a jar hung in a sack around the neck. And it also features Walt Whitman as a secondary character. And I just want to revisit this. It's no longer a popular book. I don't think it was even popular when it was published, but I do want to read it someday. And that got 1 little measly vote. Probably because they didn't know it was about Napoleon's penis. The third book is Conversations with a Clown by Michael Welzenbach. And he, at the time the book was published in the 90s, was an art critic for the Washington Post. And this is a novel, if you want to call it a novel, about an art critic talking to a 500-year-old clown about the history of art and art criticism. I thought it was fascinating when I read it as a youth. I don't know how it would hold up. This book is completely out of print. If you look at it on Amazon, it only has this hardcover printing, and it's pretty cheap, but never printed again. I do want to reread it someday. And that got 2 votes. The book that won with 4 votes was Lee by Tito Perdue. And this is a novel of a 70-year-old homeless man who is a voracious reader. In the novel, he has read his 10,000th book. And as a young man, I found that fascinating that someone could read 10,000 books. And I've always set that as my life goal, to read 10,000 books because of reading this novel. Now, when you hear about people like Steve Donahue, who's read 45,000 books in his lifetime, the 10,000 just does not seem as fascinating as the 10,000, but I still think if I could read 10,000 books in a lifetime, that would be a major achievement. Now, because this is the winning choice, I'm going to read just a little bit of the back flap. This extraordinary Southern novel describes the premonitions, nausea, and hesitation, hastening towards death of a solitary man. In the tradition of the early Faulkner, as well as the novels of Cormac McCarthy, Lee challenges our sense of decorous and suggests we begin to refine our notions of what is beautiful. The main character, Lee, and the novel's namesake, is a crusty, belligerent, and fearless septuagenarian who is filled with disgust, even madness, but not despair. A leader without followers, he attacks all visible signs of the temporal world he abhors, replacing it in his heart and mind with a gorgeous and worthy universe of his own making. His world is influenced by visions and peopled with perfect souls, but it is in Perdue's evocations of nature that these two worlds come together most forcefully. So that is the book that won the challenge, and I do intend to start reading that probably next week, along with Celeste, the Gold Coast Virgin. Thank you for watching. Have a good day. Goodbye.